We are back for the Stacy Rodriguez trial. We think they might be wrapping up today. I would say probably closing arguments today. If not, most definitely tomorrow. They've had a lot of testimony from Hosanna, who was on the stand 2 days ago and then on the stand again yesterday. If we end up getting any time, depending on their break, before the Monica Cementelli trial, I have a few things to talk about for yesterday's trial. But if we don't, maybe we'll just hold off until tomorrow, and I'll set this a little bit earlier so we can talk about it before it starts. I'm going to go ahead and put myself in the corner. I have not started yet, so we are right on time. I have to go get more coffee. Okay, I'm gonna grab more coffee. I will be back in just a minute. They're starting a little bit late today. And I forgot to open up my chat, so this is good timing that I realized. All right, there it is. With all the testimony about Javi, I've been kind of waiting to see if he might come in and testify, but it doesn't look like it. Well, I like that we were on time, and even so, I was a little bit rushing around and had to do a few more things. I'm caught up and ready, and it's not so stressful. I said from the beginning, I don't think that Stacy will be taking the stand. Is there anybody who thinks that she will? I'd be surprised, but I'm so curious to know if other people think she will, and if she did, what she would say. Evidently, in yesterday's later time of the trial, Hosanna's family started cussing at the judge or an attorney. I saw just the headline of it, and I was gonna start reading it, and then it was time to come on here. So I gotta check that out and see what's going on. If you've been with us for the Monica Cementelli trial, I told everybody that if the day starts today and she's wearing any type of bright or cute shirt, that we know that Baker will be there testifying. I bet you that is what happens. And I cannot wait to see how she is with him being there and how she's going to act, and also how he's going to act. All right, I found the clip of Hosanna's family cussing at the lawyer. I'm going to go ahead and move it onto this computer since this hasn't started yet, and maybe we'll watch just a little bit. Sorry if you've seen it already. I didn't get to see it yesterday. Yesterday was a crazy day. Okay.
All right. Just for the record, Ms. Devereaux, can you go ahead and just frame the issue, and then we'll address any testimony you want to present.
Sure, Your Honor. Your Honor, it was brought to my attention that in the middle of Ms. Ferrella's cross-examination at one time, when I was approaching to lodge an objection and to discuss it outside the presence of the jury, it was brought to my attention that Ms. Ferrella's family member called me a fucking bitch. This has been brought to my attention now by two different people on the defense team. One is Ms. Brooke Mendoza, who's an investigator with my office, and the other one is Ms. Emma Colbert, who's one of our paralegals from our office. They're seated, just for the record, approximately 2 rows north of Ms. Ferrella's family, who I believe to be her mother and her sister. And it was loud enough for them to hear that 2 rows up, and essentially only 1 row, Ms. Mendoza and Ms. Colbert are only 1 row, or they're directly behind the bar, I should say. And if they heard it, then I'm concerned then the jury would have also heard it, especially given juror number 14's proximity to the bar is maybe about 8 feet. So I would request to call Ms. Mendoza to testify first, and then Ms. Colbert.
All right. Thank you. Why don't you go ahead? You said Ms. Mendoza first?
Yes, please.
All right. Ms. Mendoza, can you come forward? Thank you. Ms. Mendoza, I'm going to have you have a seat, but before you sit down, will you raise your right hand? Ma'am, do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? All right. Thank you, Ms. Mendoza. Go ahead and have a seat. Ms. Devereaux, you can inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Mendoza, what do you do for a living?
I'm an investigator with your office.
Okay. And as an investigator with my office,
If that's true,
have you
that's
been
crazy.
assigned to Ms. Rodriguez's
Wasn't
legal
even her
team?
Family?
And as such, have you been sitting here essentially all afternoon today, March 4th, 2025?
Most, yes.
Yes. And were you here for when I was, sorry, you guys, it's really hard to do this when you're in the back, so if you could just whisper a little bit lower. Thanks. Were you present in the courtroom when Ms. Rillo was testifying?
For most of it.
And did you hear any sort of language coming from Ms. Rillo's family directed at me?
Yes.
What exactly did you hear?
The word bitch.
And did you hear it a whisper or did you hear it louder than a whisper?
I would call it louder than a whisper because I could make out the word.
And how do you know that it was, or who do you believe it was coming from?
A female.
Okay. And where do you believe that female was located?
Directly behind me.
And when you were sitting there and you heard this, who were the only females behind you?
Miss Vrella's family.
And how do you know that they're her family?
From the investigation in this case.
And is that also from viewing discovery in this case?
Yes.
And do you know that one was her mother?
Yes.
And do you know that one is her sister, Hannah?
Yes.
And were you able to tell exactly which one that was from?
I could not.
Okay. Nothing further. Thank you, Ms. Mendoza.
All right. Thank you. From the state, do you have any questions for Ms. Mendoza? No. All right. Thank you. Ms. Mendoza, you can leave the witness stand. Thank you, ma'am. And Ms. Devereaux, did you say you had a second person?
Yes, Ms. Emma Colbert.
Colbert? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
It still hasn't started yet. I'll make sure I get back to it if it does.
And, Ms. Colbert, can you tell me what you do for a living?
I am a paralegal with the Public Defender's Office.
Okay. And have you been sitting here throughout this trial?
Yes.
And is that because you were assigned to this case?
Yes,
And were you present this afternoon when Ms. Varela was testifying?
I was.
And at some point, could you hear some comments coming from behind you?
Yes.
Were they derogatory comments?
Yes.
Can you tell the court exactly what you heard?
I believe I heard fucking bitch.
Okay. And was that a male or a female voice?
I believe female.
Okay. And when you heard this, was there anyone directly behind you?
Miss Varela's family.
And how do you know they're Miss Varela's family?
From viewing discovery in this case.
Nothing further. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Does the state have any questions for Ms. Colbert?
I do not.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Colbert, you can leave the witness stand. Ms. Devereaux, were those your only two witnesses?
Yes, please.
And did the state wish to present any evidence or witnesses on this issue?
No.
No. Okay. Thank you. Ms. Devereaux, any argument, and I know there's been a lot of case law on this issue, so Ms. Devereaux, I'm going to ask that you specifically address the Waller factors, because I know that the appellate courts have discussed this quite frequently recently.
And just for the record, the court is discussing People v. Waller, W-A-L-L-E-R, correct?
I didn't actually double check the citation, but if you give me just a moment, I can confirm. And I can go over those.
I think I have it. It's essentially,
Let me go over the factors. That might just be easier, and then I'll confirm the citation in just a second. I believe the factors to the Waller test are that, one, the party seeking to close the proceeding must advance an overriding interest that is likely to be prejudiced. Two, that the closure must be no broader than necessary to protect that interest. The trial court, three, the trial court must consider reasonable alternatives to closing the proceeding. And four,
Okay, I'm not going to listen to him read it all. They actually opened the door, but they closed it. So it's still not happening. But I'm looking about what you said in the comments. Yeah, I don't think at that point he was going to get on and say anything. in their description of it, it just said that they could get in trouble, according to the judge. So I'm going to peek around and see if I can find what you're talking about. That it could have been at the end of the day or the morning of the next day. It's just crazy. Yeah, I don't see anywhere of who actually said it. So I'll just have to go back and look at the different ones that I missed yesterday. But obviously, like, not good. Show some respect. We didn't even have time to go over Hosanna's letter that she wrote when she was not arrested yet. And she wrote to Javi, she wrote to Stacy and her kids. Maybe I'll find the transcript and I'll read it later today. When we try to do part 2 to catch up. We're struggling over here. There's so many part 2s. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and look for that. Because I thought something was so weird with it. You know, she was very upset about Javi and saying she was crying and panic attacks and all this stuff. And it just jumped right into Stacy being like, and I love you too. I'm like, you just went on and on that she's horrible and you're afraid to leave because she might kill your family. And then you just jump into that being so nice towards her. And I'm like, that's weird. So if I find it, I'll read it later. I know the jury is not in here yet, but every single day, these two come in and they are just smiling and laughing and talking. And it's surprising because with her profession and what this is for, someone was murdered and it's every morning. There they are, laughing it up still. I'm going back through the comments section for yesterday's video, and boy, do people hate the defense attorneys. I mean, it's basically like the entire chat is how much they hate the defense attorneys. Yeah, so their mics are still muted. It's not me. That looked like the attorney told her to put her hands down. She said something, the hands immediately went down. This is weird that they haven't unmuted yet. So... I'm gonna check it on my other computer, but I know it's them. Yep. No audio. And Long Crimes chat is losing their mind. I don't even know how people can stay in their chat because it's so many people saying the same thing at once.
Of in the morning that you believe Mr. Dickerson was deceased by.
It was either, I can't say for sure exactly when. I do know that he was most likely deceased before the fire started, which is around 5:27 a.m. So anytime between that time, I can say that he was deceased.
Okay.
Or at least based off the video evidence and then what Dr. Burson said.
Okay. And as we've heard and we've seen, his phone traveled to the area of 4532 First Street Road in Greeley at approximately 6:13 in the morning,
Correct.
which means if he's again, deceased, someone else presumably has his phone.
Correct.
And that's really what sort of jump-started your investigation, or a big significant lead. Is that fair to say?
It was a big lead, yes.
And this case is approximately 3.5 years old at this point, right?
Yes.
And after all this time, Mr. Dickerson's cell phone has never been located.
No.
And you've had opportunities to talk to his father, Alan Dickerson, right?
Yes.
Many times, right?
Yes.
His mother, right?
Correct.
His roommate that we've heard about, Mr.
Yes.
Lamming.
Yes.
No one ever mentioned anything to you about a second phone being missing, correct?
No.
The only person who mentioned a second phone, or Mr. Dickerson even owning a second phone, was Miss Varela.
That's correct.
And Miss Varela told you about the second phone as part of her proffer, right?
Yes.
And specifically a claim that Miss Rodriguez stole 2 phones from Mr. Dickerson.
Correct.
And that's just not supported by any other evidence that you've obtained throughout the investigation.
No.
And as you testified yesterday, because of the initial efforts in the beginning of the investigation in terms of the video surveillance, the license plate readers, you knew that there was these 3 individuals in Mr. Dickerson's house.
Correct.
There was only those 3 individuals in the house.
It's the only ones I saw in some video surveillance.
Correct. And so I think you testified yesterday that essentially who was in the house was never really, after that initial part of the investigation, was never really up for debate.
As far as like, did I believe there was anybody else in the residence?
Correct.
No. After I reviewed video surveillance, I didn't see anybody else come in and out other than those 3 individuals.
And by the time November 11th comes around, you know who is in the house.
Yes.
And so that means if Mr. Dickerson's one phone is missing, it's either Miss Varela or Miss Rodriguez who took it, right?
Correct.
Especially in light of the movements of the Google location.
Correct.
And as the detective, the lead detective on this case, you're trying to figure out who took it, right?
Between the 2?
Yes.
Yeah, well, I know one of them took it. Yes.
And so as a detective, you routinely apply for search warrants, as we've heard, right?
Correct.
And you wrote numerous search warrants in this case.
I did.
And search warrants are a really effective tool because you can just secretly get it and then show up to a location unannounced and search the location.
Correct.
There's certainly nothing public about when you apply for a search warrant, right?
No.
In fact, it's designed to be secretive, the process,
Correct.
and designed to give you as law enforcement sort of definitely the advantage of surprise,
Correct.
so that people don't have the time to destroy evidence, right?
Correct.
There's no risk of losing the evidence, right?
Correct.
And you got a search warrant for Miss Rodriguez's brother's, or the family residence at 4540 First Street Road.
I did, yes.
And that was obtained again in secret.
Yes.
There was no way Miss Rodriguez or her family would have known that you guys were getting a search warrant, right?
I hope not.
Right. If this right. I mean, do you know of any way that they would have known?
Not unless that information was leaked, and I don't believe it was, so no.
By a judge, right?
Or the courthouse, but no, I don't presume that happened in
Okay.
this circumstance.
Okay. And so the search warrant was executed, correct?
Yes.
Numerous trained and skilled members of the Greeley Police Department searched the residence.
Correct.
And it was essentially in the middle of the night too, right?
Yeah, it was, I think it was close to midnight, yeah.
Yeah. In fact, one of her family members was actually in the bathroom, like using the restroom actively.
I think Ramon was, yes.
Yeah. Completely unexpected, right?
Yeah.
And every room was searched carefully.
Yes.
Every cabinet,
Yes.
under the mattress, and the beds, everything, right?
Correct.
Trash cans.
Yeah.
And Stacy wasn't there, right?
She was in jail.
Right. She was already arrested at that point,
Yeah.
right? And her family's actually finding out that she's arrested through this process.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I told them they were arrested. I don't know if they knew she was arrested before then, so.
They didn't tell you anything like, yeah, I knew she was arrested on first-degree murder charges, and that's why you're
Yeah,
here.
yeah, they didn't mention anything like that.
Okay. And Mr. Dickerson's phone was never located in that residence.
No.
The Zales ring was never located in Miss Rodriguez's family residence.
No.
The debit card was never located in Miss Rodriguez's family residence.
No.
Not a single item belonging to Mr. Dickerson was located in her family residence.
No.
Throughout the investigation, as we've heard, there was also search warrants on Miss Rodriguez's Chevy Tahoe.
Correct.
That was the 1999 Tahoe, correct?
Yeah.
And through the investigation, you and other officers learned that essentially Ms. Rodriguez kept a significant portion of her belongings in her Tahoe.
Yeah, I learned that she was living on and off inside of the Tahoe, so there's a lot of belongings, correct?
Correct. And just like the residence, the search warrant was conducted under an element of surprise, right?
Well, yeah, I was at the police department.
Correct. Because as we've seen, we've seen her getting arrested, right?
Correct.
In the parking lot.
Yeah.
And then we can all agree she was clearly surprised when you guys approached the vehicle and said you're under arrest, right?
Yeah.
And then it was immediately sealed.
Correct.
And so she didn't have any time to like hide any evidence in the search warrant hide any evidence in the Tahoe, correct?
Yeah, once she was arrested, she couldn't have gone back to the Tahoe.
Correct. And again, that Tahoe was carefully searched by skilled and trained officers.
Yes.
And you guys knew specifically what you were looking for.
Correct.
Mr. Dickerson's phone was never located in the Tahoe.
No.
The Zales ring wasn't located in the Tahoe.
No.
The debit card wasn't located in the Tahoe.
No.
Not one single item connected to Mr. Dickerson was located in Ms. Rodriguez's Tahoe.
No.
Likewise, the Malibu was also seized, correct?
Yes.
And you got a search warrant for that vehicle.
Correct.
And again, officers searched the Malibu carefully, looking for these specific items that everyone knew were missing from Mr. Dickerson's house.
Correct.
And again, the phone wasn't located in the Malibu.
Correct.
The ring wasn't located in the Malibu.
Correct.
The debit card wasn't located in the Malibu.
Correct.
Not one item connected to Mr. Dickerson was located in the Malibu.
That's correct.
And again, that kind of makes sense because the phone or the Google location of Mr. Dickerson's phone did not remain near Ms. Rodriguez's family's residence.
That's correct.
As you testified yesterday, it was only there for approximately 6 minutes,
Correct.
and then it left.
Yes.
And it left by 6:19 in the morning.
Yes.
And Mr. Dickerson's phone traveled all the way down 11th Avenue in Greeley.
Correct.
And then at 6:37 in the morning, Mr. Dickerson's phone was located just south of 32nd Avenue and 11th Avenue.
It was, I think it was more closer to 31st Street and 11th Avenue.
31st Street?
Yeah, and 11th Avenue.
Do you recall writing in your police report that it was just south of 32nd Avenue and 11th Avenue?
It would be 32nd Street and 11th Avenue.
Okay.
If I wrote that wrong, then that's not correct. It would be right around 32nd Street and 11th Avenue. 32nd Avenue and 11th Avenue don't intersect.
Okay, so 32nd Street and 11th
Yes,
Avenue.
yeah.
Okay, thank you. And that was actually the very last location Mr. Dickerson's phone ever registered.
That's correct.
And that location is only 2 blocks away from the post office on 11th Avenue.
I think so. I think the post office is there. It's in Evans, so I'm not as familiar with Evans.
Okay,
but
would it help
It may
you-
be.
Would it help you to look at Google Maps?
Sure, yeah.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes, go ahead, please.
So just so the record is clear for I'm showing you Google Maps, correct?
Yeah, you are.
And there is the 11th Avenue Postal Office, right?
Okay,
And there's that red dot right there,
okay.
right? And that is 11th Avenue and 32nd Street, right?
Yeah, 31st Street and then 32nd Street, they intersect with each other.
Correct. And
Yeah,
so there's approximately 2 blocks away from each other, correct?
approximate, yeah.
So the last known location that Mr. Dickerson's phone ever registered was only 2 blocks approximately away from that post office on 11th.
Yes,
And you know that Miss Varella's grandmother lives behind that same post office.
I knew she lived close to that area, yes.
Right. Specifically behind the post office is what Miss Varela described to you later during her proffer.
If she did, I don't remember that, but I don't discount that.
Okay. And you knew that Miss Varela would stay at her grandmother's house sometimes.
Yes,
And so the last known location of Mr. Dickerson's phone was only 2 blocks away from where Miss Varela would stay.
yeah, correct.
And you testified yesterday that you never got a search warrant for Miss Varella's location or potential residence because you knew that the phone was at Miss Rodriguez's house 20 minutes earlier for 6 minutes, right? And only registered that last time for 2 minutes near Miss Varella's residence.
No, it only registered 2 minutes near Hannah Varella's place from 5:57 a.m. to 5:59 a.m.
Okay.
I just know that it turned off approximately around that location.
Okay. So we'll come back to Hannah's house, okay?
Perfect.
Despite knowing the last known location of Mr. Dickerson's phone ever was 2 blocks away from Miss Varella's grandmother where she would stay, you never obtained a search warrant for her grandmother's house.
Correct for numerous factors.
You never, and let's just make sure we're talking about search warrants, let's make sure the jury understands how this process works.
Yeah.
You don't get penalized for writing a search warrant to a court and it getting denied.
No, I don't get penalized, no.
It doesn't hurt to ask for a search warrant.
Well, there's a process that I have to go through to actually be able to bring a search warrant to a judge.
So, right, exactly. You have to write something.
Correct?
You write a document.
Yeah.
You bring it to a judge who's on call.
I don't just bring it to a judge.
What do you do?
I have to go through the district attorney's office.
Oh, they're the gatekeeper.
They are somebody that looks at something and says, have you met the basic elements to get a search warrant? And then I can bring it
So
to
you're
him.
relying on him, right, Mr. Parelia and Mr. McCormick, to say, can I get that search warrant for Miss Varella's house since I know Mr. Dickerson's phone last registered 2 blocks away from it?
I'm relying on not just them at the DA's office, everybody at the DA's office.
Right, they're the gatekeeper, you're saying.
They are somebody that says whether or not, yes, they are essentially whether or not it can go see a judge.
Right. And again, it doesn't cost you anything, right? You're not going to get in trouble if you bring a search warrant to a judge and they deny it.
No, and I can explain why I didn't go and get one at her house.
So let me just go over, we're going to get there, okay? I promise.
All right.
So
Okay.
the factors that you knew at the time, right, were the location that the phone was, the last
Yes.
location.
Yeah.
You knew it was missing in a homicide, right?
You're saying for the factors for Hosanna's family or for the 4540?
I'm talking about Miss Varela,
Okay, yes.
okay? So, or in general, either way, right?
Okay, yeah,
You knew the phone was missing.
correct.
You knew that it was a key piece of evidence.
Yes,
You knew the last known location of it.
yeah,
And you knew Miss Varela had two family members in the vicinity.
one house, 2 family members.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, no, because Miss Hannah Varela lived in a different location, right?
Yeah, in a completely different location than what we're talking about, Hosanna's mother or grandmother's house.
Yes.
Yeah,
And you knew all of that information, right?
yeah.
And yet you never obtained a search warrant for Miss Varela's grandmother's house,
No, I did not.
even after the point of the proffer, right?
Yeah, and I can explain why that is too.
Why?
Because when I spoke to Hosanna Varela, she told me that certain evidence items were located at a trailer that was associated to Stacy. She told me that they did go to the grandmother's house that morning, But the items that were missing, she never indicated were at that residence. So at that time, I didn't have enough or believed I had enough to go to that residence. She indicated they were at a certain location.
So you just took Miss Varela's word for it, right?
In that instance, 7 months later, yes.
You didn't do anything to vet out that, to verify what Miss Varela was telling you in this instance, right?
Well, she didn't tell me there was any evidence items at her grandmother's house.
Of course not, right? She's telling you the opposite. She's telling you that Miss Rodriguez took these items to the trailer,
Yeah,
and then you went to the trailer, right?
yes.
And then you didn't find anything consistent with what she told you.
We didn't find the items, no.
There was nothing consistent with a massive bonfire that burned all this evidence, right?
We found a like stationary or outside fire pit, but we didn't find a location where items were
You
buried.
didn't find any ash,
Not in the ground, no.
right? You found nothing at that trailer to support what Miss Varela told you about the items of evidence being burned there.
We didn't find any of the items, no.
And so even at that point, you're not like, maybe we should take an additional step and verify what Miss Rodriguez is telling us and get a search warrant for her grandmother's house.
So the same factors of why I did not get a search warrant at Hosanna's grandmother's house that first on November 11th still play into why I still didn't go back and do it that day.
Because he told you not to.
He didn't tell me not to.
Okay. But he's the gatekeeper, right?
He is somebody that I would consult about whether or not getting a search warrant.
Because also, if you got a search warrant and there was something there, there was a phone there,
Yeah.
that certainly would have made things really messy when you guys, after you've done the proffer, right?
I can tell you this. If I would have found evidence that proved Hosanna was a liar, I would gladly welcome it. Absolutely.
Right, but you didn't bother to do it. You didn't bother to vet her story out.
Again, I can explain why I didn't get the search warrant at Hosanna's house that day, and then that plays into my decision later on whether or not to get a search warrant. Those factors still come into play.
Of course they do, but
Yes.
it doesn't hurt, right? There's no negative aspect other
Objection,
than it discredits Hosanna's
argumentative.
story.
I have to have articulable facts that the items I'm looking for are in that place.
Such as it
Prosecutors
being
need to
2
object.
blocks away, right? From the
mere-
last known location of a dead guy's phone.
A mere location is not enough in that circumstance.
But you certainly got it at Miss Rodriguez's family residence
And I can explain exactly what all the other factors that played into it too.
because you knew about the car change, right?
Not just the car change. So the car, the Tahoe, was registered to 4540 First Street Road. That's Stacy's residence. The Malibu was registered to 4540 First Street Road. That's Miguel's car. I also knew that her listed address was 4540 First Street Road. Then on November 11th, the first place we see Stacy and Hosanna together when we're doing surveillance is at that location. They're back at that house on the day that we arrest them.
And I'm glad you bring that up because you also never conducted surveillance at Miss Varela's grandmother's house.
We looked at the places that I knew that they could potentially be. I don't know if I gave locations to officers to go and look. I don't know if they went and looked at other locations.
Sir, you're the lead detective in a homicide.
Yeah, I am,
The buck
yes.
stops with you. You direct people where to go, right?
I do help and guide, and I set out a plan, but it's a team effort.
It's a team effort. And not one member of the Greeley Police Department was like, let's conduct surveillance at the other person's house.
So if you're indicating that before June 8th, before I knew Hosanna's proffer, before I knew anything she said in the house, that I had a bias towards Stacy in my initial investigation, that's false. I went to the...
Sir, I'm just answering my question. Just answer my question.
Okay.
The Greeley Police Department never conducted surveillance at Hosanna Varela's family member's house.
We conducted surveillance at the locations we believe Stacy and Hosanna would be at. And those all...
Mr. Burrows, it's really important that you answer the questions that are
Okay.
posed to you.
I'm sorry.
So we can get through this.
Yeah, I'm sorry. No, we didn't.
Thank you.
Okay.
Likewise, surveillance was never conducted at Miss Rodriguez's sister Hannah Varela's house,
No.
even though you knew, again, that Mr. Dickerson's phone at one point around 5 something in the morning was near her house.
That's correct. We didn't conduct surveillance there.
And just to clarify, during this initial time before Stacy and Hosanna were arrested, you knew that Hosanna had family members at 3221 11th Avenue.
Before we arrested her?
Yes.
Yeah, I knew there was family there.
Yeah, just to make sure we're all clear about that.
Yeah.
Because you actually wrote like a really nice summary about the evidence that you had at this point. And you wrote in that, quote, in further research of Hosanna, I found an Evans Police Department case involving Hosanna at 3221 11th Avenue.
Correct. Yeah.
And then 2 sentences later in that same summary, you write, quote, Christopher's phone was last registered at a location near 3200th block of 11th Avenue.
Correct.
And then just so we're clear, Hannah's address is on 29th Street, correct?
Correct.
So we're talking about 32nd Street and 11th in one location, and then just 29th Street in Hannah's location.
Yeah, it's on the west side of Greeley.
Right. And Mr. Dickerson's phone was at the 29th Street location at 5:57 in the morning on October 3rd.
Yes.
And just so we're clear, surveillance was also never conducted at Hannah's location either.
No.
Surveillance was also not conducted at Javi's residence.
No.
And so then the arrest happens,
Correct.
correct? And Mr. McCormick went through a long list of things that Ms. Varela told you about during the June 8th proffer, right?
Correct.
Yesterday.
Yeah.
And went through this whole thing about how it's consistent with what we know,
Yeah.
right? And I just want to kind of go through those things. Grab my computer real quick.
Okay.
I just felt like she was
One of them
so
was that
argumentative.
there was a dog, right?
Correct.
And that was consistent with the video Mr. McCormick pointed out.
Yeah.
That's also consistent with her just being there, right?
Yeah, correct.
Right. And then there's the sound system being in the car from the video. You could see that too, right?
Yeah.
Again, that's consistent with her being there.
It is consistent with her being there.
Then there's the evidence that she went into the back seat, and that's consistent with her being there,
Correct.
right? And then the Tahoe switch, right?
Correct.
Drinking Budweiser in the house, right?
Correct.
All of that is consistent with her being there,
Correct. Yes.
which if she had up to E65, and just so the jury knows, by E65, these two are already arrested,
Correct. Yes, I think so.
right? Because Detective Hunziker's report is supplement 63, right? And
Okay. Then,
That-
yeah, then yes, they would have been arrested.
because he was the one that approached the car.
Yeah.
And so by the time of the arrest, you knew all of this information, such as the information from the video surveillance, right?
Yeah.
You knew about them coming and going in the middle of the night
Correct.
because that was from the video surveillance.
Yeah.
You knew about the Google location records, right?
Yes.
Because again, that's how you essentially tracked these people down.
Correct.
The Cosmic Mart, right?
Yeah, I knew about them. They weren't in until sub 76.
That's not my question.
Okay, I knew about them, yes.
All of these things that you mentioned with Mr. McCormick are things that helped you track these two people down.
Correct.
And as we just talked about, all of that was there by sub 65 because it all helped you get to the point of their arrest.
Correct.
The only thing that wasn't there was the information about the weapon in the neck from the coroner, right?
Correct.
You said yesterday it was supplement 81.
Correct.
But again, she was there, right?
Correct. She was.
We also saw in prosecution's exhibit P88 the picture of the still shot of the interaction between Mr. Dickerson and the silver Malibu.
Sorry. Yeah,
Do
yeah.
you need a minute?
No, I'm fine.
Okay.
Did I answer? I said yes.
Yes,
Okay,
I appreciate
all right.
that. We saw that picture, right?
Yeah.
And as you can see in that picture, Mr. Dickerson is leaning into and talking through the passenger side, right?
You see him like turning his head towards it. I don't know if he's leaning. He's still standing erect, but
Okay.
he's turned towards it, yes.
He's on the passenger side.
Correct, yeah.
He's clearly having interaction with the passenger side.
Correct.
And Miss Varela was on the passenger side, right?
Yes, she was. I believe so.
So when she told this jury that she didn't talk to Mr. Dickerson and that Stacy did all the talking, that's not consistent with the picture.
Well, I can't
video.
I can't say who was talking inside of the car. I can just look at a picture and say, yes, he's looking at a window and the window appears to be down.
Right.
And Hosanna, yes, is in the passenger seat, but I don't know who said what
That's
in
fair.
there.
That's
Yeah.
fair. But Mr. Dickerson didn't go to the driver's side, right?
No.
And the passenger side was rolled down.
Yes.
And so by the time the two women are arrested, you knew that Mr. Dickerson's house was burned, right?
Correct.
It had been ruled a homicide.
Correct.
You knew that Mr. Dickerson had died not from the fire.
Correct.
And you had these two women in custody because you knew they were there.
Correct.
But at that juncture, you had absolutely no evidence of what happened inside the house that night.
And no evidence of what each person did inside.
Correct.
I knew what happened to Christopher and I knew the fire.
Right.
But what the people's role, no.
You had no idea the play-by-play of what happened inside those four walls.
No, I did not.
And likewise, you had no idea of what happened those few minutes after Mr. Dickerson's death.
No, I did not.
And so the months go on. They're arrested November 11th. The months go on. You're doing things like pulling jail phone calls, right?
Correct.
Jail letters.
Correct.
There's no evidence to help you out, right?
As far as like what each person's role was?
Yes, that's
yeah.
better.
Yeah, no.
Right. And you carefully reviewed those letters and phone calls, right?
Yes.
And that didn't help further figure out what happened inside Mr. Dickerson's house that night.
No.
And the optics weren't really the best, right? So you had an almost 36-year-old male bringing two strange girls back to his house at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning, right?
Are you asking me if like I think those optics are bad?
No, I'll take back the optics. I'm
Okay.
just telling you what you had, right?
Yes, that's what I had.
Right. 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. One of those girls was underage, under
19?
drinking age,
Yeah.
right? So not even old enough to drink,
Yeah.
right? And she's just a year older than the legal age, period, right?
You mean Hosanna?
Stacy,
Oh, Stacy. Yes, I see what you're saying now. Yeah.
right? And you knew that both of these girls were 5'4" tall.
Yes.
You knew that Mr. Dickerson was 6'2" tall.
Correct.
And you also knew that Mr. Dickerson was not, and I want to be respectful when I'm saying this, he was not as overweight as the females, right?
Correct.
And you also knew at this point that there had absolutely no connection between Miss Rodriguez and Miss Varela and Mr. Dickerson.
Correct. They didn't.
And so then comes June of 2022, and you've pretty much exhausted all avenues of criminal investigation. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
In terms of figuring out what happened in the house.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. There's no other witnesses.
Correct.
The house is burnt, so there's no DNA inside the house.
Yeah.
There's no more video surveillance to get.
No.
You even do things like getting the Google, I think they're called Google fences, but going to all the neighbors and asking them if they're comfortable with you guys getting who attached to their Wi-Fi.
Correct.
The court processes had started, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Because the women had been arrested.
Yeah, they had by then.
And then there's still no evidence of what happened in this house.
Of what each person did know.
That's a problem, huh?
I don't think it's a problem.
Okay, but is a problem enough for the district attorney's office to arrange a proffer with Miss Varela, right?
I can't speak to why the district attorney arranged that. I can just say I was confident in my investigation.
Okay, but a 7.5 hour proffer was done, right?
Yes.
And during that proffer, we've kind of talked about this a little bit, so I don't want to go too into it.
Okay.
But one of the very first things you tell Miss Varela is like, I'm just going to sit here and let you tell me your story.
Correct.
And that was like a 43-minute narration, right?
Correct.
And she just went for it, right?
Yeah.
And at no point during that initial 43-minute narration did she say, you know what, Detective Burrows, I can tell you the exact moment Miss Rodriguez told me she was planning on killing him.
No, not during that time, no.
No. She was never like, hey, Mr. Burrows, or Detective Burrows at the time, I know I'm here to tell you all of the information about the night of this killing, and I'm just gonna, or let me take it back. At no point is she like, I know I'm here to tell you everything, and I'm doing through this narration. And at no point is she like, by the way, I asked Miss Rodriguez at what point she decided to kill Mr. Dickerson.
During that first 43 minutes, no.
No, it wasn't until like 3 hours later, after she met with Miss Lily for 30 minutes, that she tells you that information.
I don't know if it was directly after they met, but I know it was later on when I was asking her questions that she brought it up.
Right, it was after the point she met with Miss Lily. You had stepped out of the room and given her and Miss Lily an opportunity to talk.
Okay, then that's fair.
Okay, and it was also really impromptu, right? So let me rephrase that. When she disclosed that key piece of information
Sure.
of when the intent to kill Mr. Dickerson was formed,
Yeah.
it was not responsive to anything you were asking.
No, I was talking about something, and then she said, hey, I remember something, and then brought it up.
Yeah, you were asking her about how many times Mr. Dickerson had slapped her rear end.
I think that's correct, yeah.
And you heard her tell this jury that it was just a minor event, happened 1 or 2 times, and she thought maybe it was just, kind of by accident. But she told you something different on June 8th, right?
I remember when we talked about it, she mentioned that it made her uncomfortable, but I don't remember like the exact words that were said to that.
Okay, wait, refresh your memory. Let me ask you this.
Okay.
Do you recall her telling you that Mr. Dickerson slapped her rear end or grabbed her rear end 4 to 5 times?
I think so, yes.
Do you remember her telling you during your proffer that Mr. Dickerson did it every time she stood up?
I think so, yeah.
Do you remember her telling you that it made her very uncomfortable
Yes.
and that she just wanted to leave?
Yeah, she said it. I don't know if it was in direct relation to that. She said at points during the night she wanted to leave, and then there's points where she was comfortable, like when they're in the car.
Do you remember her telling you that before Mr. Dickerson got the phone calls to go to pick up his friend, she wanted to leave?
Yes.
Like she didn't want to be there anymore. She was that uncomfortable.
Yes.
Also, during this initial 43-minute narration that she gives you, she doesn't tell you anything about Miss Rodriguez licking the blood and saying it tastes dirty.
No, not at that time.
She doesn't tell you anything during the initial 43 minutes about Miss Rodriguez being a serial killer who's killed 3 to 4 other people.
No.
And she also certainly does not tell you at all during the proffer anything about Miss Rodriguez burning other bodies or telling her she's burnt other bodies.
No, not during the proffer, no.
No, she just said that for the first time during this trial.
That she didn't relay that to me.
Right. And Mr. Parellia, you saw him, was asking Miss Varela some questions about the gang ties, right?
Yeah.
When she was testifying. And he pointed out that at one point Miss Varela described to you talking on the phone with someone she didn't know who it was, right?
Miss Varela was talking to somebody?
Miss Rodriguez was talking on the phone.
Are you saying, okay, can you ask
Sure,
again?
sure.
Okay.
So Ms. Varela testified that she had told you during the proffer,
Yeah.
overhearing Ms. Rodriguez on the phone, and she didn't know who she was talking to, right?
I
Remember
don't,
that part?
I don't know if she said that portion during the proffer. I mean, I think she talked about the gang ties, but I don't know if she spoke about a phone call specifically.
So your testimony today is that Ms. Varela told you the word gang ties or gang during the proffer.
I think she did. If I remember correctly, I thought she mentioned something about her family having some sort of gang ties, and she didn't know, or she was associated to people, and she thought they might have been from California.
And while I'm pulling up a transcript for that, as a member of the Greeley Police Department, you have a really nifty program called the Gang Unit, right?
They are still around and kind of barely. They were at that time, yes.
Yeah, they have like all their cool gear, their jackets that say Gang Unit,
I
right?
don't think it's that cool.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, neither do I, but still, right? I mean, they're a specialized unit, right?
Yes.
And they have, they track gang members in this community.
Yes.
And they've been doing it for probably, what, a couple decades now? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think it was the early 2000s it was formed. Like, I think 2004, 2005, we had some bad problems.
Right. And so at no point did you have any information that Ms. Rodriguez was affiliated with any gang.
Yeah, I can do that search myself in our system, and I didn't see that.
So this is not true, right?
Yeah, she's not tracked is all I can say.
But there was nothing also that would suggest that she had any gang ties, right?
Yeah, we didn't have any gang contact forms, or she wasn't tracked as a gang member.
Well, also, you've gone through her residence, her cars, right?
Yeah.
Her cell phone records,
Yeah.
right? Her Facebook records, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And not one, like, piece of evidence that would suggest that she has any kind of gang ties.
No, I didn't see anything obvious.
No. And you know that gang members talk a very specific way, right?
I mean, it depends.
Okay.
If we're,
They use some sort of coded language often.
it honestly depends per gang, per click, and it changes. So it just depends specifically on that gang. But they do, I can say this, they do have specific language associated with their specific gang.
Like numbers, signs, colors, right?
Yeah.
And nothing that corroborates what Ms. Varela tells you that she's in a gang.
I didn't see any evidence she was in a gang.
Nothing in the entire resource of the Greeley Police Department in the 3.5 years you've been investigating it suggests that that woman is in a gang.
I didn't see any evidence, no.
Okay. Sir, I'm going to show you a transcript of the proffer interview.
Okay.
And the really nice thing about transcripts and Microsoft Word is you can quickly do a Control F and search for a keyword, right?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. And so it'll help you to recall if Ms. Varela ever mentioned the word gang to you in this proffer.
Sure.
Same things, you can cross on it. Can I approach her?
Yes, please.
Okay, so this is the entire proffer interview, right? Do you want this on record? Yes, thank you. Sorry, I pulled this. So this is the proffer interview, okay? And actually, we can even go to the video so you can make sure it's the correct one, okay? And again, it was a 7.5 hour approximate proffer interview.
A very long interview.
Yes. So it will do this. You see I'm scrolling all the way down to 7 hours and 28 minutes and 7 seconds, right?
On the Word document, yes.
Yes. And then also I'm showing you, is that the room?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not going to play the sound. Is that Miss Varela?
Yes.
Is that you?
Yeah.
Is that Mr. Perelia sitting there with her too?
It's his back of his head. I assume it is. I can't say for sure.
But he was the one sitting next to you, to the left of you during that proffer interview, right?
At the beginning, and then he left.
Yeah.
Could you put the mic between the two of you?
Sorry.
Sorry.
Okay, I'm searching gang. Does anything pop up there?
I don't see anything.
Okay. Now I'm going to go back to the Word document. Search, Control F, gang.
Okay. Here's what I can say to
Judge,
that.
I'm going to object at this point. That's not a verified transcript. She hasn't had an opportunity to show.
Can the parties approach?
I don't know what I think about any of this morning. I thought she was being pretty annoying for a while. These two need to get it together and stop smiling when the jury is in the room. My gosh.
Clips of the video, I don't see the actual 7-hour video.
Do you want to watch the entire 7-hour video right now?
All I'm saying is I believe she said the word gang. I would feel more comfortable seeing a clip that we could say whether or not she said gang.
Can you direct me to a place in the 7-hour interview?
Well, I don't remember exactly when she said it. All I remember, and I'm not saying I can't be wrong at all. I'm not saying that. I'm just telling you what I remember is that I thought she said something about a gang and then her family being from California.
So if I Control F the word family and you look at every single time the word family was mentioned in the 7-hour proffer, would that help you?
I can't. I mean, it's a 7-hour interview. I mean, we can try it with your program. I'm not saying I'm not trusting it. I'm just saying it's a long interview, and I don't know exactly when she said it. And again, I could be wrong. I could be wrong.
Right. Because if the word gang was not mentioned, that would, again, discredit Ms. Farrell's story, right?
As far as what?
Her telling you that Ms. Rodriguez was in a gang.
You mean when she testified?
When she met with you right before this trial, right?
Oh, you're saying on that day?
Yeah. And also when she testified to this jury.
Would it discredit all of her story, or just saying that instance right
Saying,
there?
I mean, could be both, right?
Yeah. All I can say is
Yeah.
if I thought I remembered the word gang, I could be wrong, and she then told us when we met with her that she was associated to a gang.
So, in addition to the video, because I don't think anyone wants me to sit here and have you listen to a 7.5-hour interview.
No.
You wrote multiple supplemental reports, right?
Yeah.
And clearly, if Ms. Varela told you that your suspect in a homicide case was part of a gang, you would have included that in your supplemental report.
Not necessarily, no.
No?
No.
No.
Well, because when she told me that during the proffer, I didn't exactly do a transcript after that. And I would include that if it was relevant, but I didn't see anything that was relevant to the case at hand of Mr. Dickerson's death.
But again, if she had told you that during the proffer,
Yeah.
and she's telling you as a reason why she was afraid of Miss Rodriguez, and so afraid of Miss Rodriguez that she didn't come forward, that would have been in here because that is relevant. Just like that's the whole reason why this jury heard about it.
So what I would have done is I would have went and confirmed if she was in a gang, and if I found that to be true, then I would have included it, but I didn't find anything that said she was in a gang.
So you're now testifying you did look into whether she was in a gang.
Yeah, I looked into Stacy well before Hosanna even told me about the gang thing. I did a thorough search on her. I went through all her police reports. I read every police contact that she had. I mean, I did a thorough search on Stacy, and I didn't find any evidence of her being in a gang at that time.
Okay. But again, the entire significance of Miss Varela telling you, or this jury,
Yeah.
that Miss Rodriguez was in a gang, the entire purpose of it would have been why she was afraid of her and why she was afraid of coming forward.
I don't know if I can't speak to if Hosanna was directly afraid of that. I can just tell you what I believe I heard in the proffer and then what I researched.
And again, that was never included in any supplemental report you wrote.
Yeah, I would only include it if she was actually in a gang.
Not that Miss Varela believed she was in a gang?
No, I mean, there's a lot of things that I looked into that Miss Varela said that I didn't include in a supplemental report.
And you know what? I'm not going to make you listen to a 7.5 hour
Okay.
proffer interview. And I would hope that these people right here get up and play that proffer interview and says, by the way, detective, me being Miss Varela, she's in a gang. Okay? So we'll see if that happens, okay?
Okay, and I could be wrong.
And the point of this is, as you're going through this proffer with Miss Varela, she's telling you some pretty extreme things that you do document, that you do remember, right?
As far as what?
So Miss Rodriguez being a serial killer?
Yes.
She's telling you she believes Miss Rodriguez has killed 3 to 4 other people?
Yes.
And again, as you just testified, you looked into Miss Rodriguez extensively.
Yeah.
No evidence of that.
She wasn't associated to another homicide, no, that I could see.
You don't know if the Greeley area or Colorado has this string of murders that have just have gone unknown, right?
Not that I know. Well, I'm sure there's murders that have gone unknown,
Correct.
but I don't know.
Right.
That's hard to say, I would say.
But nothing you ever found corroborates any of this, right?
Nothing that I found with Stacy, no.
Right. And then she tells you things that are even more extreme, right?
Okay.
Like this fact of Miss Rodriguez is licking the blood, saying it tastes dirty.
Yeah.
And you weren't saying, okay, ma'am, now you're telling me she's a serial killer. Now you're telling me she's licking blood. You never pushed back with her during this proffer interview. You're not like, man, this sounds a bit much.
Well, I think to put in context how I do interviews and how I interpret information, I can explain a little bit of that, of why I take that information and what I do with it.
Well, you testified already. You look into it, right?
Well, and there's also a process I go internally when somebody's telling me something.
And Mr. Burrows, again, you got to answer the question.
Okay. So can you repeat it again? I'm sorry.
Sure. The point is Miss Varela is telling you some pretty extreme things during this proffer, and you never push back on her. You never say, ma'am, this sounds pretty extreme.
No, during that time, no.
And then at one point during the proffer, again, speaking in the context of some red flags in Hosanna's story, you ask Hosanna, do you know if Stacy took anything from the house?
Yeah.
Right? And that was at hour 4, minute 2, and 26 seconds of the proffer interview.
Okay.
I'm not expecting you, sir, to know that. Would it help you to, because I don't want you to testify just to agree with me, okay?
And I don't want to do that either.
Right. So would it help you to look at that portion of your proffer?
If you want to show it to me, you can.
Okay.
Okay.
A male attorney was whispering, and you could hear him say, "Oh my God," and then I couldn't hear the last 2 words. But if I could hear him whispering, I'm sure the jury did as well.
just for the record, this is June 8th, 2022, the proffer interview. The timestamp is 12:20:56, and it's 4 hours and 2 minutes and 26 seconds into the proffer interview. May I approach?
Yes, go ahead. You can approach freely for this purpose.
I hand you some 19.
Perfect. Awesome. All right.
I really don't want to blow out your ears. So
Okay.
can you just-
I'll take them off for a second, and then I'll put them back on. Okay.
Not sure.
Yeah. It skipped ahead. Yeah.
4:2:26.
Yeah, no, I can see. I'm good. I'm good with this.
You good?
Well, it's, if you're asking me what she said she took, it like, you touched it and it skipped
No, I'm
ahead.
just asking you the time that you asked her the question.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
Do you remember your question now?
Yeah. When I asked her the question, yeah, the time.
So, 4 hours, 2 minutes, and 26 seconds, right?
Yeah.
Into the proffer, you say, did you know if she took anything from the house?
Yeah.
Before that, Hosanna is never like, hey, by the way, this is specifically what I know Ms. Rodriguez took from the house.
I don't remember if she did or not before that. I just know I asked that question at that time.
Because you wouldn't have to ask that question if you already knew that.
Yeah, probably.
And that's when Hosanna, of course, claims that Ms. Rodriguez was the one who took all of these missing items from Mr. Dickerson's house, right?
Correct.
There's the debit card, right?
Yeah.
And just to be clear, she told you debit card, right?
I believe so, yeah.
She never mentioned the wallet,
No.
because you know that not to be true,
Yeah, because the wallet was in the car.
right? So in that instance, Ms. Rodriguez's testimony that she told this jury was not corroborated by the physical evidence, right?
Yeah, she said she thought he took a wallet.
Right. And it's hard to keep your stories the same from debit card to wallet almost 5 years or 3 years later, right?
I don't know if I can speculate on that.
And I want to talk about the debit card, okay?
Okay.
Because that's what Ms. Varela told you Ms. Rodriguez took during the proffer,
Yeah,
right? When she's telling you, officer, I'm telling you all the truth. And I know the importance of telling you the truth, right?
correct.
The debit card, you knew was missing, right?
Yeah, we believe so, yes.
You also wrote in one of your supplemental reports that there's also a likely possibility that it could have been burned with Mr. Dickerson's body.
That's correct, yeah.
If he had it in his pocket from going out that evening, that could explain the missing debit card.
Yes.
And as part of your investigation in this case, you and other members of the Greeley Police Department looked into Mr. Dickerson's finances.
Yeah,
Because obviously if his debit card's missing and someone went through all of this trouble to kill him and rob him, presumably they're going to steal from him too, right?
I would believe so, yes.
That's at least why you pulled things like his Farmers Bank records,
Correct.
his Sam's Club credit card,
Correct.
and there was no fraudulent or purchases on the Sam's credit card that you knew about, right?
No.
And when you got the Farmers Bank records, you found out that he had $43,293.58 in his account.
He did, yeah.
Not a penny was ever taken.
Not that I know of, no.
Not a single dime, right?
Yeah, not that I know of.
And that's significant if you believe Ms. Varela's story, which is that Ms. Rodriguez was pumping him full of alcohol to do this killing, to then rummage through his stuff and steal his debit card, right?
I guess, what do you mean by significant?
That nothing was ever taken, right? You go through all this trouble
Okay.
to poison someone with vodka, to kill them, to burn their house down, to rummage through their things, and not a penny was taken, right?
From that account?
From anything with you never found a single dime taken from Mr. Dickerson.
Monetarily, no.
And then there's the gift card. Okay.
Yeah.
That was something that Ms. Varela told you about the proffer, right?
Yeah.
And because you're the lead detective in this case, you were familiar with the items that were found in evidence, right?
Yeah.
It's your job, right? And of course, when you're hearing this information from Ms. Varela in June, you can't go back to that Walmart and pull the security video because it's not going to be there,
Yeah.
right?
It's not going to be
It's not going to
there.
be there, of course not. But you know, inside of Mr. Dickerson's wallet was a Walmart gift card, right?
Yeah.
You know, there was a Walmart gift card. You know, there was a $100 master gift card.
Yeah.
You know, there was not one but 2 gift cards to Sprouts grocery store.
I knew there was gift cards in there. I don't know every single gift card that was in there.
A Fuzzy's taco shop gift card.
Sure.
A JCPenney, if there is even a JCPenney anymore.
Sure.
A gift card. Gift card to King Soopers.
Sure.
There was 8 gift cards,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
But yeah, Ms. Rodriguez just took this one.
The one that was,
You can't speculate, right?
no, I can't. I don't know. The wallet was in the car
The car that she was in too, right?
earlier in the night. Yeah.
And the car in the house that she's rummaging through to steal all this stuff from him, right?
I don't know where she rummaged through it exactly inside of the house, other than the bedroom.
Then there's also Miss Varela's testimony about Miss Rodriguez, of course, forcing her to turn on Mr. Dickerson's cell phone at a later time.
Correct.
Remember that? And she told this jury a pretty dramatic account of looking through his phone and looking at pictures of his dog and his girlfriend and making her sad, right?
Correct.
But you know that Mr. Dickerson's phone was never turned back on.
I don't know that for sure.
But you know that Mr. Alan Dickerson gave you Verizon cell phone bills up until including November of 2021.
Yes, I think so.
So, and the girls weren't arrested until November 11th, right?
Yeah.
And so you also got Mr. Dickerson's Verizon phone records,
Yeah.
right? And as we've seen, when a phone is on, there's some sort of documentation of it, right?
No, because when a phone is on, the documentation happens when there's like data pulled or if there's a phone call made, from what I understand.
No, because as we've seen, right, from Miss Varela's phone,
Yeah.
pinging to the location at UNC,
Yeah.
right? Phones are just routinely searching for towers.
No, that's when it's pulling specific data. It actually tells you on there the data that's being pulled. On those records, in the columns, it says how many bytes are being pulled.
Sir, do you have a cell phone?
Yes.
When you open your cell phone and you turn it on, what is the very first thing it does? It connects to the network, correct?
Yeah, but what I'm saying is what I see in the records is only when there's a phone call or data session made.
Right. So if the girls were going through his phone and opening any kind of app, or as we've seen from the Google locations, right?
Yeah.
So we know for a fact when Mr. Dickerson's phone is on, right? We know that. You have Google, at least Google locations, right?
Yeah, I don't know for a fact what that phone would have done at that time. I can only speak to what the phone did at the time when Christopher had it and then when Stacy and Hosanna had it.
But you would agree. And you know, because there was actually a phone call you had with Mr. Alan Dickerson sometime in November where he's like, this is really odd. I'm looking at Christopher's Google records and it's showing by my house. Remember that?
Yeah.
And he didn't realize the fact that when he logged into like Christopher's email on Google, just by merely doing that, it pinged his location, right?
Yeah.
And so Alan Dickerson was like, this is really weird. What's going on? I know the phone's missing, right?
Yeah, I mean, but that's directly tied to his phone.
That's not my question, okay?
Yes, that
Mr.
happened.
Dickerson called you and you told him, I've been monitoring Mr. Dickerson's Google locations, and you explained to him why it's showing that the phone is active when it's really not.
I think I can clear this up. During the time, I don't know about the connectivity to the towers. I can say I didn't see another Google location during that time.
Right, and we know when Mr. Dickerson's phone was on October 3rd, the locations were tracking. right?
Yeah, yes, they were.
And you have no evidence ever that you found in 3 years from Google, from Verizon records, from anything that Mr. Dickerson's phone was ever turned back on.
Again, I can't, the cell phone records I think are separate. As far as the Google location, I can say, yeah, I didn't see another location. I didn't see another location register.
So yet another piece of physical evidence that shows or discredits Miss Varela's story.
I wouldn't say it necessarily discredits her story, no.
Or certainly in that aspect of it, right? And her testimony.
Again, the factors that I laid out, there could be reasonable explanations why that didn't happen.
Then there's also even more cell phone evidence that contradicts what Hosanna told you. So, Hosanna during the proffer tells you that during those first few hours at Mr. Dickerson's house, in the early morning of October 3rd, that she took a picture with her phone.
Yeah.
Yeah. She described being so uncomfortable that she took a picture of her phone that you could only see her legs, Mr. Dickerson's legs, his dog, and Stacy's hand.
Correct, I remember that.
And she told you specifically, actually she mentioned this picture multiple times during her proffer interview with you back on June 8th, 2022.
Correct, yeah.
And at that juncture, in June of 2022, you had
I hope this doesn't start up. I'm going to do what I did yesterday and just open it in another browser really quick. That should make it go away. We've had weird things with this.
To the cloud, which is separate from your phone.
right. So it literally takes what's on your phone and puts it into the space.
Yeah, it depends. It really depends on what parameters you set, but you could, in theory, have everything go to your phone or just limited information go to the cloud.
Correct. And so that's why you do, for that very reason, right?
Yes.
You do a warrant for the phone, but then also the cloud.
Yeah, correct.
Just to make sure no one's hiding anything, right?
Correct. And Google as well, too, works the same way.
Right, I appreciate that. And when Miss Farrell is telling you during her proffer about this picture, you knew that picture was never found on your phone during the Cellbrite dump?
Yeah, I didn't. So that's something that I looked back on the back end to see if the picture was there. So at the time she's telling me about the picture, I had gone through the pictures, but that didn't ring a bell to me. So then I went back and looked at it later.
Right, and it would have rang a bell because you knew Mr. Dickerson had this dog, Juna, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You knew that he was white, or she, I don't know if it's a he or she.
Yeah, the dog was white.
The dog is white,
Yeah.
right? And you knew, you were carefully looking through all of these phone records in the Cellbrite to get any evidence from October 2nd or 3rd, right?
Yeah.
Or anything, certainly seeing the dog would have jumped out at you, right?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't see a face of a white dog. I don't remember seeing that picture beforehand.
And Cellbrite's a really cool program because you can click a button at the top that really easily distills the date of images, right?
If the image is captured, like separate from a screenshot, if the image is captured, it usually, for the most part, will give like a created date or a modified date.
Right. And again, by the time you did the proffer on June 8th, 2022, you never, after carefully going through everything, you never saw this picture.
Before that date, no, I don't remember seeing it.
And so you're hearing, and also likewise in the cloud records too.
Yeah.
And so you're hearing Miss Varela say, or Miss Varela tell you about this picture she took, and you're like, that wasn't in anything I saw, right?
No, because I mean, at that time, I mean, I'm going through so much. Like I said, I didn't specifically look for that picture. As I'm looking through pictures, I was mostly looking for more text messages at that point as I'm going through, because it takes a long time to go through phones. It takes a long time to search through everything. It wasn't until she said that I actually went back and specifically looked for that picture.
And I appreciate that, but we're also talking 8 months into this investigation, and surely you would have seen a picture of a dog, Mr. Dickerson's dog.
I can try to explain that. I can just say that it takes a while, and then I also have, I mean, I can explain what else was going on around that time with the investigation and the other things that I was doing too, if I can.
That's not my question.
Okay. I don't remember noticing that picture when I went through it beforehand, and then I went back to try to find it again after.
And what's odd about all this about the picture is it wasn't until 5 hours and 50 minutes into the proffer, she tells you for the very first time, after mentioning this picture multiple times earlier, that she actually deleted that picture.
Yeah, she said she deleted it.
Yeah. And she had just completely neglected every time she mentions this picture, the 5 hours and 50 minutes earlier. Oh, by the way, detective, I also deleted that picture.
And she told me she deleted it.
Later, right? And when she's telling you and describing to you during the proffer that she deleted it, she's actually kind of like stuttering through that process, right?
I don't remember if she was stuttering or not.
Would it refresh your recollection to review that part of the
Sure,
proffer?
yeah.
And let me be clear also, her telling you that she deleted it came after you asked her, quote, did you delete any of the things that were from that night? Any of the text messages or the picture you took inside the house, right?
Sure, that sounds about right.
She didn't volunteer it, right?
Again, if you're saying that's what I said on there, I don't discount you. I'm not saying it. That's not true.
So I'm going to show you part of the proffer, the timestamp, June 8th, 2022, and it's going to be at, timestamp on the video is 14:10:59. It's going to be 5 hours and 52 minutes and 25 seconds into the proffer itself.
Okay.
May I approach?
Yes, go ahead.
Was that, sorry. Was that volume okay?
Yeah, it was okay. Yeah.
Do you remember your question?
Yeah.
So again, you had to ask her, did you delete this picture?
Yeah.
Because you knew it didn't exist, right?
Again, I don't remember specifically looking for that picture. That information I learned then, that's when I went back to look and see that it wasn't in the phone.
And then after you ask Miss Varela, did you delete this picture? She goes, and then she tells you I deleted it, right?
Yeah, and then she goes into what took place.
So there was that initial kind of stutter response.
Sure, yeah.
And then she comes up with this story for the first time that you're hearing about how she told Stacy that she took this picture and that Stacy was livid, and that was why she deleted it.
I think it was something to that effect, yeah.
And Hosanna claimed that she deleted the picture from both her phone, right?
Yeah.
And then she described to you somehow essentially breaking into her sister's phone at a different location and deleting it off her phone too.
Yeah.
So Hosanna is telling you that she was able to essentially distract her sister Hannah, steal her phone, go into the phone and delete it, right?
I don't know if she said she was distracting her or she just asked for her phone and then Hannah gave it to her or something like that.
Yeah.
That wasn't me.
And that, more significantly, Hosanna claimed that she was able to delete the picture And she said, quote, "My sister doesn't even know about it."
I think she said something like that, yeah. At least the deleting the picture part.
Right. She said, quote, and I was like, yeah, sorry, "My sister doesn't even know about it because I had deleted that off my sister's phone. And to this day, she doesn't know anything about it."
Okay, yeah.
But that was inconsistent with 4 hours earlier in the proffer. Hosanna told you that her sister definitely did know about the text message, right?
The way that I took that was that she knew about the text message,
Sir,
but she...
again,
Okay, yes.
thank you. And the reason why you knew she knew about it was because at 1 hour and 31 minutes and 40 seconds into the proffer interview, Miss Varela tells you that she sends this message to her sister, and her sister actually responded to the message.
Yeah.
And her sister responded immediately saying, "Oh my gosh, be careful."
Yeah, according to Hosanna, yeah.
So that means she saw the picture and saw the situation of her being at this random guy's house in the middle of the night, and her sister was cognizant enough to be like, "Oh my God, be careful."
Yeah.
And regardless, and you were here, Miss Varela was like, "Yeah, I think my sister was drinking that night too, so that may be why she didn't remember it, or that could explain when I said, I didn't think she knew about it," right? You heard her say that?
Yeah.
At no point after June 8th, 2022, did you go to Hannah Varela and say, "Ma'am, did you remember getting a text message on the night of a murder?"
No, and I can explain why.
That's not my question.
Okay, no, I didn't.
Okay. So when Hosanna is telling you this, and you know there's some discrepancies here, right?
Mm-hmm.
You never were like, "I'm going to go interview Hannah," right?
No, I had every intention to go interview Hannah,
You never did.
and there's a reason why.
Why?
And Mr. Burros, I really don't like having to tell people the same thing.
I'm sorry, Your
And
Honor.
I'm really trying not to blow my stink here. It's been a long trial.
Okay.
This is not a conversation. Evidence is produced at trial through questions and answers.
Okay.
I need you to respond to the questions. The district attorney's office will have the opportunity to redirect if they choose to do so, and what they choose is important.
Okay.
But we're never going to get through this
Okay.
if you want this to be a conversation. So just, if it's a yes or no answer, or if it's a yes or no question, it should be a yes or no answer.
Okay, Your Honor, I'm sorry about that.
So never in the 3 years since Ms. Hosanna Varela's proffer did you interview Hannah?
No.
And again, all of these red flags and inconsistencies are important, especially in light of what you knew about Miss Varela and her ability to tell law enforcement the truth concerning in this case, right? And let me ask it to you this way.
Okay, I'm trying to answer yes or no, so
No, I
I'm
appreciate
sorry.
that. That was a bad question.
Okay.
Up until the proffer, your only experience with Miss Varela was the interaction that we saw in the parking lot.
Correct, yes.
And again, the two women were contacted unexpectedly, and you actually spoke to Miss Varela first.
Correct.
And as we saw in the video, Miss Varela is taken from the driver's side of the Tahoe, right?
Correct.
And she's removed from the Tahoe to the next vehicle over. That white SUV next to the Tahoe.
Yeah, after she's arrested, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
She's removed away from the Tahoe where Miss Rodriguez is.
Yes.
And Miss Rodriguez is on the way other side, right?
Correct.
And Miss Varela is with you, and I think is the officer or Detective Radin who also comes that we see in the video?
Yeah.
Brett Radin, I think you say something like, you okay, Brett, or something
Yeah.
like that? Okay. So she's with two police officers, right?
Correct.
And you ask her a series of questions that we saw.
Yes.
And at every question, she lies to you.
Yes, she does.
She lies to you even about where her mother lives.
I Sure, I don't remember that specifically, but she lied about everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
So going up to this proffer, all you knew about this woman was that she lied to you at every juncture.
Sure, yeah.
And also, presumably, when she's in this location and she's away from Miss Rodriguez is with law enforcement, she's with law enforcement, you guys aren't going to let anything bad happen to her in that moment, right?
No,
She's out of earshot from Miss Rodriguez, right?
I believe so, yeah.
And at no point does she say, hey, detective, I am terrified of that person over there.
No.
She doesn't say, detective or police officers, thank God, I'm glad you are, like, I can move a finger now.
And
Right.
she said nothing like that.
Right. And throughout Miss Varela's proffer, there was also numerous times where she would refer to other people and how Miss Rodriguez's behavior towards her impacted them, right?
Yeah.
So we heard her testify that she had these prior domestic violence claims or alleged allegation, or let me take that back, I'll strike that. We heard her testify that Miss Rodriguez, according to Miss Varela, was violent with her in the past,
Correct.
right? And there was actually a time where Miss Varela described to you her children seeing bruises on her, right?
I don't remember that in the proffer. If it was, then it was in there.
Okay. Would it refresh your memory to review that part of the proffer?
Sure.
Your Honor, maybe this may be a good morning break time. I can do that while we're breaking. Just
Sure,
for the
we'll
time.
go ahead and take our morning recess at this time. Give me just a second here. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to remind you that until the trial is completed, you must not discuss this case with anyone, either in person, using the internet, or by any other means. This includes members of your family, people involved in the trial, other jurors, or anyone else. If someone approaches you and tries to discuss the trial with you, or if you see or hear anything about it, even accidentally, please let me know about it immediately. You must not conduct any research, undertake any investigation, or otherwise obtain information about the case from an outside source. You must not read or listen to any news reports or internet information or other electronic sources
Okay.
about the trial.
I definitely thought the judge was about to lose it. He was very close. He was at his limit, I think. You know, he was interrupting and trying to tell just a story instead of just giving an answer and moving on. Obviously, I don't think he was trying to do it for any bad reason. I think that's just how he talks, and that's what he was doing. But yeah, it would have gone on forever. It still is going on forever. And I'm really happy that they're not making him listen to that 7.5 hour audio to try to find one thing from it, because that's frustrating. Since they're on their break and we have Monica Cementelli trial coming up, I am going to go ahead and close this out. I have Monica's trial ready to start at 12:30. I'm going to go get more coffee, and then I'll probably go in early just so I have everything set up and review with people who maybe weren't here yesterday with us. So, all right. Thank you for watching. I'll see you at Monica's trial if you have time to watch that.